Okay, so Wolves take on Everton on Monday in what feels kind of like the start of a nice little run for Wolves before, obviously, the December horror show. In and this is probably the easiest game out of the next three. Obviously, Everton are a good side. I don't think anyone's going to deny that. They're above us in the league right now, but they're on a really bad run of form. And you can argue we are in terms of performances, but ultimately, 3 wins and a draw is okay. Whereas Everton, no win in their last three, and that kind of early season form where Damari Gray was banging them in and Andros Townsend was banging them in, it feels like that's kind of dropped off a bit. If you look at expected points, we're basically the same. We both got 14. So this does feel like a very even matched game. But in terms of form, on paper, we should be winning this game, especially at home under the lights. For me, I'd make quite a few changes to the team against Leeds. I'd drop Dendoncker out instantly. Obviously, Neves didn't play last week as an injury. I think a lot of people were surprised when Dendoncker came in, and he was pretty bad, to be honest. We'll need Ruben in this game, and obviously, you'll stick with Jamatinho. Back three, I'd keep the same, and obviously, you won't change Jose Sarr. Don't see the point in risking Willy Bolly with his injury record. Nelson Semedo obviously stays at wing back, although I still see people trying to push this narrative that he should get dropped. Um, like Nathan Judah on the podcast, I was listening to that earlier, and apparently he should be. Anyway, let's just ignore Nelson Semedo. Aït definitely has to come in, especially now with Marcel's injury. I think it kind of felt like Marcel would get injured eventually and Aït would get his chance. It does feel a bit weird that he's kind of had to wait for an injury to Marcel to bring in Aït. It's the one thing I've never really understood about Bruno Lage, why he keeps playing Marcel. I don't really see the benefit of it, but it'd be nice to see him get a run. And then the front three, obviously Jimenez will start up front, but to be honest, on the two wing slots, I'm not really bothered who plays. Obviously Huang, you've kind of got to keep in just because of his goals, but I don't think he's played well in the last two games against Villa and Leeds. Obviously, he's got a goal, but I don't think he's played particularly well. Like if Bruno dropped him, I wouldn't be that bothered. And Trincao, I've just brought in because I think in the first few games when Trincao played, whether you like Trincao or not, he brings the best out of Semedo. Semedo's best performance has been when Trincao's been in front of him, and Trincao just feels like the most well-rounded out of the four. I don't think he's the best at anything necessarily out of our wide options, but I think he's probably the most well-rounded. And in the good performances we've had, albeit we didn't score in them, Trincao's kind of been a big part of that, and he's dropped out for a few games. And it's not like our attack's got any better since Trincao's dropped out, so I'll bring him back in. I think there's a good mix there of creativity and balance. I wouldn't be, to be honest, if Adama Traore played on the left and Daniel Plent played on the right, I wouldn't be that bothered either. Um, Especially with Everton's defence, I think any of our forwards should be good enough to get this Everton defence. Although it does kind of feel like Rafa Benitez will probably just park the bus, stink the place out, and maybe get a point, especially after that Watford game. You know, Obviously Everton will be a bit low on confidence, but I don't think you want to play a team that's just lost 5-2 to a relegation battling side, personally. In terms of Everton, they are quite similar to us in a lot of ways. If you look at shots, Everton kind of on target, sorry, very similar amount to us. They're not a big shot side. I mean, we were at the start of the season, obviously, but kind of dropped off a little bit. Quite even in attack. Obviously, Everton are out with. I don't think Richarlison is going to start the game, and Dominic Calvert-Lewin definitely won't start the game. So it'll probably be Gray, Rondon, and Andros Townsend. Although to be fair, Damari Gray and Rondon have caused us problems in the past, but Everton aren't some big shot side. We shouldn't be worried, and our defence should be able to handle that. Um, Again, Everton in terms of on the ball, they're the third lowest in terms of passes in the Premier League, down there with like Burnley and Newcastle. They're not route one, but they're very functional. Very safe passes, a bit long bally. Obviously, when you've got Sam and Rondon, you kind of have to do that. I don't think that's really Rafa Benitez's fault. I don't think that'll be the long term evolution of Everton. Um, but to be fair, we're not really a big passing side either, but we're a lot better than Everton. It does feel like at home we should be dictating this game. We should be having more shots. We should be having more passes, especially after the Everton's loss. I just can't see this being an even game like the Leeds one where we're getting piled on. It feels like this will be a game where we'll have to take the emphasis. And you know what? I don't think that's a bad thing. We haven't really had a game like that since probably Brentford or maybe Watford. So I think that will suit us, to be honest. In terms of key passes, it's interesting with Everton because they're actually really high on like key passes and progressive passes, but in terms of actual passes, they're quite low, which to me suggests the midfield is kind of they're very functional. Do you know what I mean? They defend low and they get the ball up very quick. They're not actually doing much passing. When they do, it's quite effective. Do you know what I mean? They're not wasting time just making pointless passes like you could argue Nelson Semedo and Marcel have done, right? So I guess that's interesting. They're only below like the traditional big four. Um, Again, in terms of dribbles, Everton bottom, Wolves top. So again, this isn't going to be like a vintage Everton side. You know, it'll be very functional. It won't be sexy football, and that's not really Rafa Benitez's fault, right? This is not a good Everton squad. It's probably the worst they've had since. It's probably the worst they've had since like early Moyes, to be honest. The good thing about Everton is they're not a big pressing side. They're not awful. They do press a bit, but this isn't Leeds. This isn't Brentford, especially when we played them earlier on in the season. This isn't a high pressing side. They're not awful at it. Obviously, they're not like down the bottom, but Salomon Rondon, Damari Gray, Andros Townsend, we're not going to get pressed from the front. Tom Davis and Allen, there's some legs in there to fair, but without Decore, I think Wolves should be able to control this game. I think you could get away with playing Leandro Dendoncker in this game. I don't think you need Ruben Neves and Jairzinho to handle pressing, but I wouldn't take that risk. I just don't really see how we don't win this game. You know, at home, I don't think Everton have clear strengths above us, and with the form, we should probably be winning this game. Again, in terms of aerial duels, they're below us. So, you know, we have struggled with that in a bit in the past when we played teams like Burnley and they've kind of just gone route one against Connor Cody, for example. Everton aren't a clear, they're not awful in the air, but they're one of the lower sides, so that's not a big threat either. One thing is they have actually won the most penalties, which I thought was a bit interesting. Probably because Damari Gray and Andros Townsend are so like direct, whereas we haven't won one yet, which I thought was interesting. But apart from the fact that Everton win penalties and they're quite useful with the ball, they don't waste it. There's no like obvious strengths in this Everton side, and regardless of what side Bruno Lage picks, whether he goes with Dendoncker, whether he goes with Podence or Adama or the front three I've picked, I think we should be winning this game. And when you look at that run I showed at the start, with the December fixtures, you kind of want to take 9 points from the next 4, maybe even 10 to be honest, just to give you that safety bracket into January. You know, especially if we want to do business in January, like Bruno suggests. Let's say we do get like 12 points in these 5 and maybe pick up a couple here. You look at the Premier League table, and by then we might kind of be in and around the top 6. And if you're bringing in Renato Sanchez or Sven Botman or whoever the club want to bring in, you need to get a good points haul to just make the club a bit more attractive, you know, and kind of be in and around there into the new year. But I think Wolves should be winning this game. I'll go 2-0 Wolves. I don't really see Everton being a big threat with their injuries, and I can't see Rafa Benitez pushing the game big due to their injuries. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel, like the video. There'll be a match reaction after the game, or probably the day after actually, because it's a night kickoff. But if you enjoyed, like the video, subscribe, and yeah, peace.